Hello, hello. I am Seraphine Arocha, and this is the Seraphine Podcast. Today, we are interviewing one of my colleagues, co-workers, co-volunteers over at Wayside Waifs. Her name is Ashley Stanley. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so glad you're here. I am going to give a little introduction to who Ashley is. So Ashley Stanley is the Humane Education Manager at Wayside Waifs. It's a no-kill animal shelter in Kansas City, Missouri. And she's been with the organization, it's like 5 years now?
Yeah, in August it'll be 5 years.
That's crazy. When I hit my 2-year mark, I was like, woohoo! I mean, it feels good because it can be animals, although they're cute and cuddly. It can also be pretty heavy stuff on day to day, and we'll get into that here in a sec. But she also oversees the development and the implementation of the Humane Education Program. And that's reaching over now 1,000 students each year?
Yeah.
Wow. Including no more bullying. It's a curriculum that's an innovative approach to ending the cycle of violence towards people and animals. She's certified as a Humane Education Specialist and has given presentations both locally and across the United States on topics including the importance of using animals to support character development, using humane education to stop the cycle of violence, and unlocking what we like to call empathy, understanding the similarities between pets and people. I think where we begin is first by addressing that no more bullying. It is taught in 25 schools?
Yeah, 25 schools locally. And then in addition to being in Kansas City, it's also being taught across the country as well. So it's something that we developed as a way for us to teach it here, but then also for other people to be able to purchase the curriculum and teach it where they are too. So it's being purchased by other animal shelters, other schools, other just concerned community members. We actually have a doctor up in Massachusetts who's teaching it. She works with students who have epilepsy, and she is incorporating that into what she does with her students there. So it's really cool to see just kind of how it's morphed. But it's being taught in, it's 23 states and like 36 cities within those 23 states.
That's so cool. So how did you actually get into working in humane education and also nonprofit? I mean, because this is like when you go into it, you know you're signing up for not easy work. So talk me through like how you decided to get into what you're doing.
Yeah. So I kind of fell into this particular role. Yeah. Growing up, I always wanted to be in education. I knew like education, that's my jam. That's where I want to go. And in college, I was studying to become a music teacher. Actually, I was like, I can do this. This is, music is one of my all-time passions. And so I thought I wanted to teach music. And I got all the way about up to where I needed to start doing my student teaching. And I was like, no. The school system, the public school system, the way it is, I will not survive in that environment. I can't do it. It's too much pressure. It's not where I feel like I can have the biggest impact. So I started kind of looking to see what other kind of educational avenues I could take. So I like to call it like alternative ways of education. So I worked for the YMCA for several years, doing before and after school programs and summer camps, and then eventually kind of working my way up over there. And then I got burned out. It's that nonprofit world, you know, it's compassion fatigue. That's something that we talk about a lot in the animal welfare world, where you're giving yourself to what you're doing. And that's what happens in a lot of nonprofits, because you're trying your hardest to get back. You don't go into nonprofit work because you want to make a profit yourself or you want to make money.
Yeah.
It's hard work and it's not a lot of pay, and that's okay because usually you're doing it because you feel really, really strongly about something. And so I found myself just completely and totally at the end of my rope, burned out, could not see my hand in front of my face. I was just done. And I ended up leaving that job without anything else lined up. It was the scariest thing in the world. I just said, okay, I worked part-time for them for a little while, and I said, okay, something is going to have to come along. And I saw this position posted over at Wayside Waifs for a humane educator. And I was like, I have no idea what that is. Like, I'm just full honesty. Yeah. Like, I'd heard of humane education. Yeah. So I thought, okay, well, at least check it out.
Yeah.
And in my head, I went into it thinking, great, I am going to get to work into education. You know, I'm going to get to work with kids, which I love doing. And then I'm also going to be around really cute animals. Like, of course I want to do this.
Yeah.
And then I was like, whoa, this is way more than I ever thought it was going to be.
Yeah. It was the pivot point for me in my life. I had, I dabbled here and there in philanthropy, and, I was very self-consumed in like my life. But other than that, like it's one of those things that is like almost like a little bit of a trick, because you look at these cute puppies, these sweet cats, these little fur animals, and you're like, all right, I'm going to go in, I'm going to volunteer my time. It's going to be great. You go in, you go out, you make some friends, and then you realize that animals are reflections of people. You see animals that are neglected. You see animals that come from too many brothers and sisters. You see animals that are in pain, and to witness it and not have it, like me, have it affect you it's something that when I went in, I remember watching these videos of people going in to raids. And I was like, if I can't sit through one of these videos without crying, I can't be a volunteer. Like, I have to be able to look at the worst situation, because I can't go in and be this crying mess, because I knew that's what I felt like going into it.
Yeah.
And it all changed. It completely changed, because even though I do still cry, I cry often. I think that was the beauty of Wayside, is teaching me, like, no matter how much strength you have, no matter how stoic you are, to witness any creature in pain or discomfort or left behind, all you want to do is help. Mm-hmm. So it's funny though, because there's a lot of volunteers who are like, God, you thought way too much about this. Like, you watched those videos. When you went into this position, did you have any animal experience? Because I literally went in with like, I have dogs, but I didn't realize like how much it takes to work with animals.
Exactly. I didn't have any professional animal experience. I mean, I had animals growing up. We were very much an animal family growing up, but didn't have any other experience working within animal welfare. I've learned so much, and I learned very, very quickly. Yes. It's almost like being, thrown to the wolves, in a sense, where it's like, okay, here you go. You're going to take off running, and let's see what happens. And, it's one of those things that you do learn very, very quickly, and you do see so much, and you get really good at compartmentalizing things. And at the same time, though, like, even 5 years in, there's still things that I'm learning, and there's still terrible things that I'm seeing. It's really interesting. Sometimes, with animal welfare, you see the worst things in the world, and then you also see the best things in the world. And it's like trying to get to that spot where you feel the balance, and you find the balance of like, okay, all of these terrible things that are happening, they are generally always balanced out by some really magical and wonderful things that are happening. And so being able to be a part of that, like, magical, wonderful part, makes those really terrible things a little bit easier to swallow. And so the sooner I could like figure out that balance and figure out like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing here, and this is awful, and I want to cry all the time, but oh, hey, look at all these other really cool things that are happening.
Yeah.
That helped.
It's so crazy too, because I never really understood like walking into the lion's den until 2 instances in my life. I always like loved to scare myself on stage and theater and performing, and I love that feeling in my heart, right? Mm-hmm. But then I remember the first time, when you volunteer, there's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And is there one more that's like,
there's the 3 tiers, and then after the 3 tiers it goes into Peace Academy or Confidence College.
yeah. So this is where, for me, when I first went in, you think of tier 1, tier 2 dogs, and they're usually cute and they're docile or they're shy. And you know, they're easy to walk. And then you're there for a few months, and then you see that there's actually a lot more tier 3 dogs, and they're big and they're scary, and sometimes they're pit bulls, and sometimes they're like these dogs that you're like, is it a wolf? You know, and I remember being like, I want to know how to work with them, but that confidence. So the beautiful thing about Wayside is they do this incredible training to where they make sure that you as a dog walker feel completely comfortable, and you can keep going back for training. And I remember my first Lion's Den experience of just going up and seeing a dog that I knew could just, he could take me down. And I had done, I think, 2 rounds of tier 3 training, and I'm opening up the latch and the heart is beating. And then all of a sudden it's like this, and you let this breath out and you just ground yourself, and you get into this very small cage with a big dog. And again, they're not small cages. They're actually pretty big kennels at Wayside. Can you describe to me the first time that you were like in over your head with an animal? And then we'll go into the No More Bullying project, because that's like walking into the biggest Lion's Den ever.
Yeah. And I know the exact moment I felt that when I was in a classroom. So I'm not proud to admit this. I still feel sometimes like I'm in the Lion's Den at Wayside.
Yeah.
As much as I'm so much more confident than I used to be. And it's really interesting. Like, the animals can pick up on your energy, and they can absolutely tell. Like, if you go into that kennel and you're nervous and you're not sure what you're doing, they know, and they're going to then like mirror that energy back to you. Like, it's been the greatest lesson in just energy management and like recognizing my own. But mine is, and my biggest hurdle, and I still have this, is just getting in and out of the kennels.
Yes.
It is terrifying. It is the most anxiety inducing, because in my head, I'm like, oh no, I'm going to let this dog out. This dog is going to just take off. Totally. It's going to, because they are, and you think about it from their point of view, like, they're so excited because this person is giving them attention, number one.
Yep.
And they are about to take them on a walk, and this poor dog probably has not been out on a walk yet today. Yep. And they're just like, yeah, I gotta go. And if you show any hesitation at all in just the opening of the door, like, they're going to hit it and they're going to get right past you. And just the anxiety of that, the possibility that could happen. I mean, it took me months to be able to actually just walk a dog at Wayside, because from the get-go I was like, I can't do this. Give me the cats all day long. And here I am.
Did not know that.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's crazy, because now you're like a beast mistress. Like, when I see you, like, you're like, you feel like you can feel the energy from you that way. But
I try to be. I still, the bigger dogs, I love them. And I mean, that's kind of what I gravitate towards, but I still have that inkling of like, I don't want to mess this up. I don't want to be, and in all honesty, the worst thing that happens is a dog gets loose, and you just call out, hey, loose dog. And there is an entire team of people that are there in a heartbeat to help you. And it's not, I mean, obviously we don't want to make a habit of it, but it's also not the end of the world, but just that thing, like, I don't want it to be me. 100%.
Yeah. And I have actually been that person with the loose dog. It terrifying. It was right after the holidays, Christmas, New Year's Eve. And I remember there wasn't a lot of people. So when you volunteer, there's a sign up list. And during the holidays, a lot of people just kind of stay with their families. So the volunteers aren't coming in as much, like right after the holidays. Then everybody gets guilty, and then they're all in there. You know, it's like, okay. Or New Year's resolutions, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember it was just me. And there was one of the tier 3 dogs, and I I had just taken out this big Labrador, and he was so cute, so floppy. And he goes in his cage, and there's these little hooks, and they rarely come out, or it's rare that one like is missing or anything like that. And I'm with the other dog. I thought I had secured the Labrador in the kennel. I'm with the other dog walking, and the Labrador goes bloop, 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 bloop. And I'm with a tier 3 dog that charges for the lab. So what do? Obviously, I've got all my skill training, and you're taking the dog, and usually you're bringing it between like your knees, the hind legs, like behind, to pull them back because they're heavy dogs. Don't want to hurt them. And I had these big rubber boots on because it was the winter and kind of icy. And I'm yelling, and I'm panicking because I'm like, and I'm trying to get the other dog out and around. And the dog snaps back, and it's the first time that I've ever been bit. And when I say it almost never happens, it almost never happens. And just missed the boot. And I remember all I could think about was the lab. And it was like this feeling in me then and there. And I remember taking the dog, and the other lab is safe and sound. And I'm walking out with the other dog. And I remember crying because I felt like I'd let the dog who had bit me down, right? Because it was like, oh my gosh, I should have understood. Like, did I do the hook? Did I not do the hook? And then from there, it was such a learning experience for me too, because you really understand this sense of not rushing, taking a breath, and also really understanding, like, meeting someone's energy and seeing and listening to them.
Yeah.
And I think right now in the state of the world today, I mean, coming out of COVID-19 and now, like, with all the social uprising and all the unrest, I think listening now is really important. So I'm going to listen to you right now, because I think the other part of the lion's den, and it really isn't a lion's den, it's courageous to go into a place that needs a lot of help. And it's scary when you feel like you're one person. I'd like you to talk about what you do when you go into the classroom, and talk about that experience of the lion's den in the classroom.
Yeah, I would love to. And before that, I have to just echo what you said about that, that learning how to listen and learning that energy. I've learned more about communication with people and more about myself and how to be a better communicator with the world around me just by working in an animal shelter. It teaches you so much. And part of that has come from working with the animals, and part of that has come from being in the classroom with students. So we go in, our No More Bullying curriculum is a 5-day curriculum. So we go into the same classroom for 5 days, Monday through Friday. We spend an hour each day with the same group of students. And sometimes we're seeing, we kind of had to put a max on how many classes we could go to each day, just for our benefit and also our animals' benefit. So we do up to 3 classes a day. So we could be working with 90 students every single day. When we go in, and the program is based on the idea that we are helping students to understand 5 core values. So we talk about responsibility, compassion, being humane, self-control, and integrity. And we talk about, what does it look like to practice these core values, not just with people, but also with animals. And then we bring an animal with us to each lesson, so they have that living, breathing animal right in front of them. So they're connecting with these concepts on a different level. We joke a lot that none of the things that we're teaching are new concepts. They have all, and I even, when the kids, they're probably like, oh, that Miss Ashley, why does she keep doing this? Why does she think this is so funny? But when we introduce the core value of responsibility, I make this huge deal out of, like, I'm going to teach you a word you have never seen before. And I really try and hype it up, and I hold up our little flashcard, and I'm like, responsibility. And their faces just sink, and they're like, oh, God, okay. And I'm like, well, you've never heard this word before, right? And they're always like, no, we've heard this word, and it's a whole little shtick. But then I tell them, guess what? I absolutely knew that. Like, I'm not walking into your classroom thinking you have never heard of the word responsibility. Yeah. But how many of you, saw that word and thought, great, another grown-up is going to sit here and talk to us about responsibility? Super. And they're all like, yeah, we totally thought that. It's like, I get it. Like, these concepts are hammered into students' brains from a really early age. And I get that. It's because it's important. These concepts are really, really important. Creating a culture of compassion, especially right now, is so important. But you have to figure out how to do it in a way that's actually going to stick with kids. And so that's where the animal piece comes in for us. It's allowing us to have these conversations with students, but incorporating animals into it so they start to think about it a little bit differently. They start to empathize with this animal that they have in front of them, which then in turn helps them empathize with the people around them too. They start thinking about things a little bit differently. One of my favorite go-to examples, and one that I think will probably be important when we can actually start holding classes again, but just thinking about the words that we use with each other. It's something that words are so incredibly important, and they carry so much weight, and that's a really hard concept for students to understand. And so we'll kind of talk about, with each class, we try and personalize it so that what we're saying is applicable to what they're going through, because each class is different and each little classroom culture is going to operate in a different way, and you're going to have different levels of trauma that are in that classroom. So you really have to get to know those kids, and you don't have a lot of time to try and get to know them. But we'll kind of talk about some of the things that they say to each other or that they've heard said to each other. And then I usually have my dog Maisie, a little pit bull mix that I take to the classroom with me, and we'll sit in a circle around Maisie, and I'll say, okay, those words that you are hearing each other or that you've said to each other, I want you to say them to Maisie. And they can't do it. They're like, why would you ever ask us to do that? And I'm all of a sudden the most awful human being because I want them to say these mean, horrible, terrible things to Maisie. And it's like, well, let's stop and think about that for a second. If you wouldn't even use those words towards Maisie, like, what in our brains happens to make us think that it's okay to call people those names? Yeah. And they just kind of start to think about it in a little different way. And that's really all we want them to do, is just start thinking about people differently, thinking about animals differently, start thinking about, the backstory, the what has happened to this animal or what has happened to this person, to make them, do the things that they're doing, so that we can try and understand them a little bit better, to have more compassion for them. And that's the entire basis of humane education, really, is just to try and help both students and adults have a better understanding of the world around them so that they can take care of it better. I remember walking to a classroom, and they tried to prep me for this when I first started, like, hey, this is what you're going to go into, and you're going to be in a lot of the more urban areas of Kansas City. I was like, yeah, I totally got this. Like,
Michelle Pfeiffer,
yeah,
right?
I'm like, hey.
Yeah, totally. Right.
And they're like, no, you also need to understand that. And at the time it was myself and our last humane education manager. She was like, we're also going to walk into this classroom and we are very white, and they are not. And, that's something to be aware of too. And I was like, yeah, no, I can do that. Like, I grew up in small town Gardner, Kansas. Right. There's not a lot of diversity there. But in my head, I was like, I work for the YMCA. Like, I've seen a lot. I got this. And I walked in and it was like, I do not have this. It was awkward and I was fumbling, and I was just very much aware of the color of my skin and very much aware of, I don't want to be the person that comes in and talks to you or talks at you. Yeah, more at you. I don't want to be the person that talks at you because I have no place to talk at you. I want to be the person that talks with you. I want to learn just as much from you as I hope you can learn from me. And it was those very painful first, few months of being in the classroom and just recognizing I do not know half as much as I think that I know. And I don't know what these students have been through and what they are carrying into the classroom with them. And I at least have to figure out a little bit more, and to be able to reach them. And once I started being able to recognize that, and once I started admitting that to them, I think I earned their respect too, because I'm very comfortable standing in front of a classroom of students saying, I recognize I am standing in front of you as a white woman, and you have no reason to listen to me. I have just walked into your classroom and I've come in with the ball of energy that I am.
Totally.
And why would you listen to me? So once I could admit that, and I could say, you know what, I get that I don't know. Yeah. I understand that I don't know. Then I could start that learning process, and I could tell them what I did know about other things. But that's also where that animal piece comes in, because it is a beautiful way to connect, to find that common ground where it's like, I don't know you, you don't know me, you don't know this animal, but let's connect over this animal, and let's kind of like start to build that foundation and just see where it goes from there.
Totally. I remember the first time I witnessed the beauty of just this intertwining of education and children at Wayside. So I first got involved with the reading program at the library, and then going to the schools. And I remember just observing and watching the story being read first to the child, and then there's this dog, right? And you watch them kind of lean in, and then all of a sudden you're passing the book over. And then instead of them being like, I'm going to read this to show you the words that I know and I'm performing for you, it was just this beautiful dance between the person reading and the child who's having problems reading. And because the dog was there was this that third party of like not performing, and the dog kind of looking and then sounding out the word, and that feeling of being judged, like teacher and student, and feeling vulnerable, just like sounding out each syllable because they don't know the word. For some reason, it was just that much easier, because you have this energy force that's like just there, like this little lump of sweetness.
Yeah.
And it just takes the pressure off. And I remember just in awe, and it was so crazy, because it actually, at this certain school I went to, where they did the reading program with the child that was trying to learn, was actually on stage. And it was an empty stage, an empty, like, normally where you'd perform in front of a group of people, and how lovely and serendipitous or well thought out. I don't know. It might have been like a complete, like, thought out thing, but they set up just this little reading area in the middle of the stage. And I got to watch it, and I knew at that moment that I was like, I wanted to sit with that child. I wanted to be with that dog. I wanted to go in that school, and I wanted to help those teachers out. So the thing that was so frustrating is that the funding for these programs, they're just not there. Like, and then the other thing is that the actual teachers, the liaisons, because if we go into these schools, we just can't go, hey, we're here, let me take a child and help them how to read with this dog. Like, there's so much in terms of permission and understanding, like even the breed of the dog there for a while, like wanting to bring a pit bull, and was like, in some states. I saw this sense of like, there was like this feeling in me of like, no, people need to understand, like, these teachers are overworked. And if there are volunteers that can come in and help them, we need more of this. And that's why I just dove in with you, even though I was so I know I'm an empath. Like as soon as I went with you, I was like, I'm good. And then literally when we left that first classroom, because we went pretty heavy first.
Yeah.
Will you explain?
Yes.
Explain.
Yeah. And that actually speaks to the point of, teachers just needing support and needing that help. I've had, we're lucky enough that we offer all of our programming completely free of cost. So it doesn't cost schools a dime for us to come in and do any of our programming, because we understand that the schools don't have the funding and they don't have the support and the resources. And it's heartbreaking to see and to have conversations with teachers. And I've had countless conversations with teachers where they literally will just say, what else can you do? What else can you bring to our classroom? How else can you help? Because we need more. And as someone who's like, wanting to help as much as I can, it's like, yes, okay, what else can I do? You're right. Let's just create something on the spot and let's go and do it. But it's heartbreaking though too to see the state that a lot of our schools are in and just see that lack of support, and especially just within our own community. That was something that was really eye-opening too, was going from a school in downtown Kansas City and more of those urban areas, or on this side of Troost or wherever, and then the next week I'm in a school in Shawnee Mission, and just to see the stark differences. Or I'll have a school that's in KCMO and they're like, we don't have a counselor, so we are the ones who are in charge of being everything to this student. If there are behavior disruptions, if there's something, like, we're that person, or they have a counselor, they're spread between multiple schools. And it's like, oh my gosh, these are the schools where we need the most mental, emotional support here for these students. So yeah, anything that we can try and do, we're like, tell us what you need and we will see what we can come up with. And that's where we actually ended up reaching out to you, because we had this beautiful school and we love them so much. And they had come to us and said, we have this group of students who are not succeeding very well. They're having a really hard time in their traditional classroom. So we have a different classroom environment set up for them. And, typically didn't know how they would be able to handle a regular no more bullying class where it was, 5 weeks, or not 5 weeks, 5 days, and here's an hour every day. They're like, we're not really sure, attention span wise, if that's going to work, just because these kids are dealing with a lot. And so he said, okay, well, can I observe for a little while so we can see what we're doing, and we can try and come up with something that is going to be the best fit for your students. They said, yep. So I went and observed for a few times, and it was very clear that before we even got to the no more bullying stuff, we needed to just do some work with them on just being able to, quite honestly, be safe with an animal in the room, and to feel that safety within ourselves, to help that animal feel safe. One thing that I love about No More Bullying is we do have the freedom. We have such an amazing team. John and Karen are our other educators, and we could not do the program without both of them in our corners too. And we all have a really great understanding of, we can't go in there and teach a lesson and just spit it out verbatim. Like, that doesn't do anybody any good. There are some days where literally the only thing you can do is walk into a classroom and be peace and love. Totally. And we just have to remind ourselves, like, even if we don't get anything done other than being a peaceful and loving entity for these students, that's still no more bullying. We're still completing our mission. And so that's kind of where this side program started to develop from, where it was like, okay, we're gonna come in. I'm gonna call my friend Seraphine and I'm gonna see, if she can come in and help us. And we had to start with bringing a very tiny puppy into, and at first, we had to do some prep work before we could even bring a live animal in, because the energy level coming from those students, it was like, I can't guarantee that I'm going to be able to keep them safe, and I can't guarantee that I'm going to be able to keep an animal safe. Yeah. And at the end of the day, that's my number one priority. Yeah. So we had to do a little bit of work. And then we had you come in and just work on finding that, some of that balance and some of that just like, I'm going to stop, I'm going to relax, I'm going to take a few deep breaths, even if it's just for 15 seconds, trying to find that and try and help them just find a little bit of time to reset a little bit. And those are, and I probably shouldn't be saying this, but it's those kinds of things that are my favorite. Give me that any day of the week. Give me that those really hard moments over just standing up and teaching what is written, because it's like, my heart hurts so badly for those students who just, sometimes can't see a way out of things, and
their cage has been rattled. They're literally living in a rattling cage.
Yeah.
And it's so, it's like the reverb, even if they aren't in the rattling cage, whether it be their home environment or whether it be the inconsistencies of their life, if there's abuse, even if they're away from it and in the safe space of a school, the reverb, that echo is still on them.
Yeah. It absolutely is. And it's so funny because it parallels with animals so much too. Yeah. We talk about within the animal world, an animal going over threshold. So you have all of these stressors that build up with an animal. And at a certain point, they could go over threshold. And at that point in time, their stress reactions, they're not what you would typically expect from them. And then it takes a really long time for them to come back under that threshold. So, they could have had a really stressful event where their owner has gone out of town, and then something else that'll happened, and their reaction was completely not what it normally would have been. Their owner comes back. Well, that doesn't immediately fix the problem, or they're out of that situation. It doesn't immediately fix that problem. They still have to take time to go back down, and any little thing that happens in that like decompression time is going to send them right back over. And it's the exact same way with students. They, are going through some really hard things at home, and it's piling up and piling it up, and they're going over threshold. And it takes a long time for them to come back and decompress down off of that. But when they're not even given the chance to decompress because this is happening and this is happening and this is coming from this direction and someone's, stealing their pencil or looking at them the wrong way, they are shooting up and over threshold constantly. And it's like they are constantly in this survival mode, and they don't know any other way.
Yeah. I think I have so much compassion and empathy for it, because I feel things on like this crazy level, and I'm fascinated by people who can contain emotion. And that's why I looked at those dog videos of dogs being hurt, because I was like, you have to strengthen your resolve. You have to strengthen your resolve. And then it literally just took me Wayside to realize that it's okay that I cry faster than other people, because there's a sense of release and there's a sense of feeling your emotion. Mm-hmm. And in some ways it's a gift, because when you see that child with the wall, you want so badly to help them break it down. And there's just a way to be better, to be kinder, to be gentler. And there's always a way. So I don't know. It's been strange for me during this time, because I felt, we were really entering into this new path of education at Wayside, and I felt so right in that room with you. And then we had to go indoors, and it got cut off. Mm-hmm. And then this murder of a man happens, of color, and there's so much rage, right? Rage, just fucking rage, that this man had a knee on his neck, and people want to scream and they want to yell and they want to protest. And I think about the fact that we're in boxes with masks on our face, and excuse me, I have so much respect for the people who are trying to pivot and trying to help people. Before we were in the boxes, we were already having a tough time. So our teachers need the help and the support. Mm-hmm. But now we're in these boxes and these kids are observing all of this. And they're not allowed to feel it and talk to other people. And they're in the rattled cages, and I think that that's where I look at where we're at and this sense of taking a breath and being like, all right, if we have this sense of responsibility because of this illness that's out there, how do we go about opening up the windows, at least, to these rattling cages? And how do we get the information? How do we get the connection still, even if we can't be in the schools? And I think that that's where I reached out to you over this, and I was like, I want to have a charity event, but it's during COVID, and I want to raise awareness about what you're doing, because there needs to be more people. I know there's more people out there that want to help and want to help our educators, and there are obviously other programs out there, but what you're doing is amazing. And I want to create a mini army of us, and I want to figure out a way, and I want to help you figure out a way. And that's why the money being raised at the event is going towards you, and also Big Brothers Big Sisters. But yeah. So just, I want to say first and foremost, thank you, because you brought so much into my life. And I guess I ask you now, as a white woman, right? It's funny. I feel so awkward. Like I'm trying to learn, and I'm even having I'm even having a guest that is transgender. I'm learning new languages, and it's not. And I've always had an open heart, mm-hmm. but I still have like that ingrained in me, whether it be racism or confusion, or I've got a pivot point, right? Mm-hmm. So can you talk to me as an educator, as a white woman who I think is doing things pretty fucking gracefully through all this? Can you talk to me about how you're navigating this?
Yeah.
And advice.
Oh, well, I don't know about the advice part, but I think because I think I'm still trying to figure it out too, yeah. And I think that's the first step. I think it's admitting that you don't have all of the answers, and you're never going to have all of the answers, and you don't know, but it's saying, okay, I'm going to stop talking for a little while, and I'm going to listen to people who at least know more than I do. And I'm going to observe, and I'm going to listen, and I'm going to amplify their voices when I can and where I can. And I'm just going to kind of soak it up and soak it in for a while. And it is hard right now to have all of this happening at the time where it's happening. And like you said too, with like wanting to connect with people, because that's really what we need is we really need that connection. And that's, I think, the root of where a lot of these issues stem from, is that we're not connected to each other, or we're only connected to people who look like us or have the same belief system as we do. And we have to find ways to connect with people outside of our own little bubbles, because there's so much that can be learned when you just reach across the table and have a conversation with someone who doesn't look like you, or is not built like you, or just has a completely different belief system. And I think that goes both ways. I think I see a lot of frustrations rising with people who, don't hold the same belief systems as they do. And that's really hard too. And, you see people, full disclosure, I had to just totally give up Facebook a few weeks ago, where I was like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I am feeling too much of this. You know, there was so much fighting and so much anger that was happening across Facebook, and nobody ever changed their mind because of a Facebook rant. There's, never. And engaging in those arguments with people and screaming from the rooftops that I'm right and you're wrong, that never works for anybody. And I don't want to ramble too much about it, but there's so much there. And, I think it comes down to just trying to find something that you can connect with somebody over, and then using that as a building block, using that as a way to open doors to more conversations, and, just finding that common ground. That's what we try and do with students too, is just find that one piece of common ground that you can build from and go from there and there. And there are some things that you're never going to agree on, and that's okay. There's some things that we're going to have two different belief systems on, and that's okay too, as long as we can still have respect for each other as an individual. The problem that is happening is there are some fundamental belief systems out there that are incredibly painful and that are incredibly just wrong.
Yeah.
And it's finding ways to connect with those people that have those belief systems in order to try and build a relationship with them to help them see. And that's what a lot of people, it's hard to do that. And it is to try and put in the time and the effort and the energy. And not everybody has that time and effort and energy. And not everybody should, that's putting a lot of pressure on people. And that... And sometimes it feels like it is a losing battle out there, but you have to start somewhere, no matter how small it is and how small of a thing it might seem like. It can always build and grow. Yeah. I don't know if that actually even makes sense, but
no, it does. I mean, it goes back to, I just laugh because I roll my eyes because I'm so... Once you open Pandora's box and you have so much self-reflection, there are some things that I used to pride myself on. The fact that I'm this yoga teacher, and I've studied all of these texts and I really know compassion. And now it feels like so tone deaf being like a white woman yoga instructor that's like peace and love. I'm like, God, shut up. But then in the next breath, there's so many of the teachings, and there's basically kind of the metaphor of like the hands that give to others, to give back to yourself, because you can't give from an empty well, right? Mm-hmm. And there's this balance. And I think the one thing that I'm observing right now is because we've been indoors, right? There's been a lot of giving back to ourselves for those in a privileged place. Mm-hmm. And those in a privileged place who they're like having the time to be alone with themselves in a room. I've seen a lot of people either confront an ugly vision of themselves and they're like, what have I done with my whole life? And they beat themselves up, and now they have all this motivation and they're doing all these great things, and they're like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and da-da-da. Like they're literally growing and becoming these great evolved people, right? And then you have people that are looking in the mirror, and then it's like slowly but surely, it's like they're going inward, and they're starting, I can feel it in some people, to where they're shutting down. And there's this weird dance now where I've had friends that I've been friends with for years, and they have shut down. And I'm like, how? You're in a place of privilege, like you're shutting down at the time that like you need to look around, that people are in worse places than you and they are struggling. So let's figure it out. Like let's, and again, I get it. There's mental illness. There's so many factors that are happening right now. But I think it's so important that these conversations happen, And I think even though, you can take the Facebook off, it's always important to go back on when you have the energy, because you are somebody who I will go on and look at your page, because I'm like, well, if she's still trucking through, then you know what? Things aren't so bad. And then there are times where, like right now, I'm like, why the fuck am I doing this podcast now? Why am I putting myself out there and stumbling through figuring out how to be better with my verbiage with my Black friends, and why am I putting myself out there at 43 when I can barely work an Instagram account? Like why? Because it's because it in the end, you do want to shut down some days, because you're like, it's hard. It's hard. So how do you fill your empty well?
Oh, well, man, I'm still figuring that one out too, I think. I think you make a really good point. I think it is important to, kind of be honest and vulnerable and let people see those things and see how hard some of this stuff is. And what I think is so cool about what you're doing with your podcast too, if I can just take for a second, is that you're figuring all this out in front of people, and you're doing it because there's people that need to see it. And I can only imagine that there are people out there who maybe are those people that are like just kind of withering down in on themselves. But then maybe the hope is if they see you doing it and they see you figuring it out, like maybe that'll help like give them the oomph they need to start digging themselves up out of it. Because that's my thing with Facebook and stuff like that is, I'll go to Facebook and I will post goofy, weird things because that's what fills my cup.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, there are times where I'm posting that and I'm really, really struggling on the other side of this, but trying to look for those lighter moments is what helps me get through. But I think it's important for people to see that open and honest and vulnerable side of every single one of us, especially those who are out there trying to create change, because people that are out there making it look like it's super easy are not doing any of us any favors.
No, they're
favors.
not.
Yeah.
I mean, it's to a point to where, like, and no lie, I had to hire a brand manager to help me with Instagram and Facebook, because I'm like, I can't take pictures and feel perfect. I don't want to even edit a picture of myself. I don't like that. I don't feel good looking in a camera and always being the most perfect version of myself, because I'm a fucking mess.
Yeah.
And I'm learning and I'm trying to be better. But there are days I want to celebrate when I have it all together.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, but I don't want to put it too much in people's faces because I don't want to make them. So then you just sit there and you're like, you want to literally be like, fuck. It's like, so.
And sometimes you have to.
Totally.
And that's the filling the bucket, is just giving yourself the freedom to react. Like we like to say, feel your feelings.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to. And sometimes you have to like recognize when you have to take that time and just scream at the top of your lungs. But it's having that realization and having that knowledge of yourself of this is what I need right now in this moment. And then being comfortable and confident enough to say, I'm going to make sure I get that, as much as one can, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you forever. And I am so glad that you're my friend. And I know that you're going to be in my life for the long run. I really sincerely in my heart believe that. And I would like you to, I guess with our last few minutes, kind of share with people if they're in their little boxes right now and they feel the feelings of like, I want to do something. How could they help maybe at Wayside or maybe other places? How can they get involved?
I love that question because I think that is a really great starting point for people who are in their little boxes. And I think that's a great way to start to connect with the world outside of you again, because there's so many different ways that you can connect with so many different things, whether it's Wayside, whether it's Big Brothers, Big Sisters, whether it's, no matter what, but it's I think first you stop and you think about what you're most passionate about, like what really pushes that button for you and, elicits those really strong emotions of like, yep, this is either not right, I want to do something about it, or this is what I really love. Like really trying to stop and find that passion that you have somewhere inside of you. It could be plants. It could be,
environmentalism.
Yeah. There's so much out there, and there's just the possibilities are endless, but it's about trying to find those things and finding what kind of like motivates you and what sparks, to be, stereotypical, what sparks joy for you, and then looking to see what else is out there and what organizations can you support locally who are doing that work, and how can you get involved? Is it volunteering your time? And if you can't volunteer your time right now, can you volunteer, monetarily? Yeah. If you can't do that, can you at least spread the word that this is out there?
Yes, use your platform.
Yes, whatever you have, because each one of us has the ability to make change in the world. Yeah. And the way I might make change is not going to be the same way that you make change. And the way, my footprint's going to be different than your footprint. And that's okay. It's supposed to be that way. It takes all different types of people doing all different types of things to create a bigger change. And so it's just taking that initial, sometimes a very scary step of figuring out, what do I bring to the table? What can I do to help? And then doing it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you don't have to save the world.
Yeah. No, you can't actually.
You can't. and you just have to take that one step forward, and it's all in the attempt, because usually you will fail.
Yeah. You're going to fail so hard, and it is going to hurt really bad, and you're going to have road rash. Yep. And it's that moment after you fail of, what next?
Yeah. And I'm alive.
Yeah.
Like I'm alive, and let's try it again.
Yeah, exactly. My, some of the best advice that my partner ever gave me was, I was in a situation where I was like, I don't know what to do. And she said, well, do the next right thing. Like that's all you have to do in any situation, is do the next right thing, and figure out what that is. And it's like, oh, yeah, no, you're right. And it is that simple, actually, is just figure out what the next right thing for you is, and then do that.
Yeah. I love it. I will end on that note, even though I don't want to end on that note. And although you're not on Facebook anymore, because I usually say, where can people find you if they want to either follow you or just find out more maybe about Wayside? It's funny. I'm really understanding now how privacy, but also being public, like there's a beautiful balance.
Yeah.
So where can people get involved?
Yeah, so they can go to Wayside Waifs. We've got all of our information there. Our No More Bullying curriculum actually has its own Facebook page. So I technically still am on Facebook, and I check in every now and again, just because sometimes I do still like to post about the weird, crazy things that happen at my house, or some of the things that I'm learning. But our No More Bullying page during this time especially is really transformed into just general humane education and general things that, we're finding and we're learning and we're posting about, and videos that we're creating to try and help not just students and teachers, but families, really, because that's who our educators are right now, is families a lot of the time. So finding ways to support them. We've got that Facebook page. Wayside they're on all the social media sites too, but waysidewaifs.org is where the hub of all of our information.
Thank you so much for just like, you in your own way have changed my life dramatically. So I want to keep working and doing and spreading the good word. And thank you for being on my podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I love it. Thank you for joining us. And take a look at Wayside Waifs. It's a pretty special place. See you later.